I always imagined my wedding would feel like stepping into sunlight. Instead, it felt like hiding inside it. The room glowed with candlelight, soft, golden, forgiving. We had rented a small historic house on the edge of town, the kind of place that hosted poetry readings and quiet anniversary dinners. That night, it belonged to us. 20 white chairs lined the wooden floor. A borrowed string quartet tuned their instruments near the fireplace. The scent of garden roses, real, not the towering arrangements my future mother-in-law would have demanded, rested gently in the air. There were only 12 guests. 12 people who knew how to keep a secret. I stood near the window, smoothing invisible wrinkles from my dress, listening to the murmur of our closest friends. Every laugh sounded slightly too loud. Every clink of glass felt like it might echo beyond the walls. Joy hovered over us like something fragile, beautiful, but easily broken. Daniel squeezed my hand. "Still time to run," he whispered, smiling. His smile carried both lightness and weight. He was trying to make me laugh, but there was something behind his eyes, something alert, watchful, like a man who had grown up expecting doors to burst open at the worst possible moment. "I'm not running," I said. "Are you?" He shook his head. "No," he said softly. "Not this time. Not this time." The words carried more history than the room could hold. We weren't hiding because we were ashamed. We were hiding because love, in Daniel's world, was a liability. His family believed in legacy, in optics, in carefully curated appearances. They owned half the skyline downtown, real estate, law firms, private equity stakes. Their last name opened doors, it also closed them. And I was never meant to walk through those doors. I met Daniel 3 years earlier at a charity event I almost didn't attend. I was there because my nonprofit had been invited to present a proposal. He was there because his father had underwritten the entire gala. He was standing near the back of the ballroom when I finished speaking, far from the spotlight, far from the cameras. While everyone else shook hands with donors, he asked me a question no one else did. "Do you actually believe this will work?" he said. "Or are you just hopping?" I told him the truth. "I believe it will work," I said. "But I also believe it'll take 10 years and more sacrifice than anyone in this room is willing to give." He smiled like I had just said something rare. That night, he didn't tell me his last name. I didn't learn it until our 3rd date. By then, it didn't matter. But to his family, it mattered immediately. The first time I met them, I understood the rules before anyone explained them. The dining table alone could have seated a board of directors. Crystal glasses sparkled under a chandelier the size of my childhood bedroom. His mother, Eleanor, wore a silk dress that whispered when she moved. His father, Richard, didn't smile when we were introduced. He assessed. "Claire works in community development," Daniel said carefully. Richard's eyes flicked toward me. "Philanthropy," he corrected. "That's admirable." Admiration, in his voice, sounded like distance. His sister, Vanessa, asked where I went to school. When I answered, she nodded with polite indifference. "Regional," she said. "Charming." Everything was charming. Everything was smaller. Everything about me was described in diminutive terms. That night, as we drove away, Daniel's jaw was tight. "I'm sorry," he said. "For what?" I asked. "For them." I thought love would be enough to bridge the gap. I underestimated what legacy does to people. Over time, the comments sharpened, subtle at first. "Are you sure she understands the expectations?" Eleanor once asked Daniel, not quite quietly enough. "Expectations of what?" I had replied. She smiled as if I'd missed a joke. "Of belonging." Belonging in their world meant blending in, wearing the right designers, saying the right things, hosting the right events, having the right background. I had none of those things. What I had was conviction. I believed in earning my place, not inheriting it. I believed money should serve people, not define them. Daniel loved that about me. His family feared it. When he proposed, it wasn't at a gala or a yacht or a vineyard. It was in my tiny apartment kitchen, flour on my cheek, rain on the windows. I don't want a spectacle, he said. I want a life. I said yes before he finished the sentence. The explosion didn't happen immediately. It simmered. Richard requested a conversation. Eleanor began forwarding venues. Vanessa sent a list of approved planners. Daniel declined them all. We're thinking small, he said. Small, Richard repeated as if it were a disease. Intimate, Daniel clarified. That's not how this family does things. The word family hung in the air like a contract. That was the first time Daniel walked out of his father's office without shaking his hand. The inheritance conversation followed. It wasn't presented as a threat. It was framed as concern. You're entitled to a future, Richard said, but decisions have consequences. Translation, choose wisely. Daniel chose me. And suddenly, invitations stopped. Meetings were postponed. Access was restricted. The family lawyer, Mr. Caldwell, requested documents Daniel didn't understand. We didn't argue about it at first. We tried to be reasonable. We'll have a ceremony later, I offered, when things settle. They won't settle, Daniel said quietly. He knew his family better than I did. He knew that control, once challenged, tightens. The idea of a secret wedding wasn't romantic at first. It was defensive. If we do it quietly, Daniel said one night, sitting cross-legged on our living room floor, they can't sabotage it. Sabotage, I laughed. He didn't. You don't know what they're capable of, he said. I thought he was exaggerating. I didn't yet understand how much of his childhood had been built on compliance. When he was 16, he wanted to study music. Richard redirected him to economics. When he was 22, he fell in love once before. The relationship ended after concerns were raised about the girl's background. When he was 25, he tried to invest in a sustainable housing initiative. The board voted it down. Every choice had been curated. Until me. The decision to marry quietly became our act of rebellion. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just ours. And so there we were, in a room filled with candlelight and 12 witnesses, choosing each other without permission. As the ceremony began, I felt something shift inside me. Fear was still there, but so was defiance. Our friend Marcus officiated. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke about partnership, about choosing love daily, about building something stronger than expectation. When Daniel said his vows, he didn't look at anyone else. I choose you, he said, voice steady. Not because it's easy, not because it's approved, but because it's right. Right versus approved. That was our entire story in one line. When I spoke, my voice shook. I choose you, I said, even if it costs us everything. There it was. The cost. We sealed it with a kiss. Applause filled the room. Laughter, tears. For a moment, fear dissolved completely. Joy won. Champagne was poured. Glasses clinked. Our friends embraced us with fierce loyalty. You did it, my best friend Leela whispered. You actually did it. Yes, I said. I believed we were safe. Halfway through the reception, Daniel's phone buzzed. He ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. He glanced at the screen. His expression flickered, just briefly. Spam, I asked. Probably, he said. But he silenced the phone and placed it face down. Minutes later, mine vibrated. Unknown number. I stepped into the hallway and answered. Silence. Then breathing. Then a voice I recognized. Vanessa. You always liked dramatic timing, she said calmly. I suppose tonight feels poetic. My stomach tightened. What do you want? To congratulate you, she said, and to warn you. Warn me about what? A pause. Secrets have a way of surfacing, she said, even the old ones. The line went dead. I stood there for several seconds, listening to the echo of her words. Old ones. When I returned to the room, Daniel was laughing at something Marcus had said. The joy felt suddenly thinner. I leaned toward him. Your sister called. His smile faded. What did she say? That secret surface. His jaw tightened. She's trying to scare us. Is it working? He didn't answer. Instead, he reached for another glass of champagne. An hour later, Mr. Caldwell's name appeared on Daniel's phone. This time, he answered. Yes, he said quietly. I watched his posture change. Stiffen. What do you mean? He said. The music continued in the background. A toast began near the fireplace. Someone was describing how Daniel had once driven 3 hours to help them move. Loyalty. Generosity. Love. But Daniel wasn't listening anymore. He turned away, voice dropping. That's not possible, he said. It would have been disclosed. A long pause. His face drained of color. When? He asked. Another pause. No, he said sharply. Not tonight. He ended the call. What happened? I whispered. He looked at me as if he were seeing me for the first time. They know, he said. Know what? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he scanned the room, like a man calculating exits. Before he could speak, the front door opened. No one had been invited beyond our 12 guests. The room quieted instinctively. Richard stepped inside. He wasn't alone. Elinor followed, composed as ever. Vanessa walked behind them, expression unreadable. No one stopped them. The quartet faltered mid-note. Richard's gaze landed on us. So, he said evenly, you went through with it. Joy collided with dread in a single heartbeat. This is private, Daniel said, stepping forward. It stopped being private the moment you signed those documents, Richard replied. What documents? I asked. Vanessa smiled faintly. You didn't tell her, she asked Daniel. The room felt smaller, the candlelight harsher. Daniel's silence was louder than anything Richard could have said. Tell me what? I demanded. Richard reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a thin folder. You should both read this, he said, before you celebrate too much. He handed it to Daniel. I watched my husband's hands tremble as he opened it. Inside were copies of financial statements, legal documents, a letter dated 27 years ago. Elinor spoke softly. We hoped it would never come to this, she said, but you forced our hand. What is this? I asked again. Daniel's eyes moved across the page, slower, slower. Then he looked up. And in his face, I saw something I had never seen before. Not anger. Not fear. Something closer to unraveling. This isn't real, he said. Richard's voice was cold. It's very real. Silence pressed against the walls. What does it say? I whispered. Daniel swallowed. It says, he began, voice barely audible, that I'm not. He couldn't finish. Vanessa did. Not entitled, she said smoothly. Not biologically related, not what you thought. The words fell like glass shattering. The room spun. Related to who? Someone in the back whispered. Richard didn't flinch. To me, he said. The candles flickered. Love had been our rebellion. But blood, real or imagined, was their weapon. I looked at Daniel. He looked lost. And in that moment, the wedding we had built on secrecy collapsed under the weight of something far older than either of us. From private joy to public unraveling, we were about to learn that hiding from judgment is one thing, but hiding from history is impossible. Chaos doesn't always arrive screaming. Sometimes it stands calmly in the center of the room and speaks in measured tones while your entire world splits down the middle. The candles were still burning. Champagne glasses still shimmered in trembling hands. Our friends stood frozen between celebration and exit, unsure whether they were witnessing a family disagreement or the collapse of something foundational. Daniel didn't look at anyone. He stared at the document as if it might rearrange itself into something less devastating. "I'm not your son," he asked Richard, but his voice lacked accusation. It carried something worse, confusion. Richard's expression didn't crack. "Biologically, no." The word biologically sliced through the air. Elena folded her hands together. "We intended to tell you," she said softly, "when the time was appropriate." "When is that?" Daniel asked. "After I buried you." Vanessa exhaled, almost bored. "You're being dramatic." I stepped closer to Daniel, slipping my fingers into his. He felt cold. "What does this mean?" I demanded. "For him, for us." Richard's gaze shifted to me for the first time since entering. "It means," he said evenly, "that Daniel's legal standing within this family's holdings is more complicated than he has been led to believe." Complicated. A word used by powerful people to soften damage. "Spell it out," I said. "It means," Vanessa interjected, "that without bloodline, inheritance isn't guaranteed." There it was. Not grief. Not apology. Control. Daniel let out a hollow laugh. "So this is about money." "It's about truth," Richard replied. "No," Daniel shot back. "If it were about truth, you would have told me years ago. This is about leverage." The room felt like it was shrinking. Our guests slowly stepped backward, giving the argument space as if it were a physical fire. I could see two battles unfolding at once, one about identity, the other about power. "Who is my father?" Daniel asked. Elena closed her eyes briefly, as though summoning composure. "A man named Thomas Hale," she said. "It was complicated." Complicated again. "When?" Daniel pressed. "Before our marriage," Richard answered, "but after our engagement." The implication hung heavy. "You knew," Daniel whispered. "Yes. And you raised me anyway." Richard's jaw tightened. "I gave you my name." "A gift or a transaction?" Daniel's hand slipped from mine. "I need air," he muttered. He moved toward the hallway, but Vanessa blocked him gently. "You don't get to storm off," she said. "Not when decisions have consequences." "Move," he said. "Not until we finish this." I stepped between them. "He doesn't owe you composure tonight." Vanessa's eyes flicked toward me, sharp and assessing. "You've always been bold," she said. "It's almost admirable." "Stop," Daniel snapped. "Don't drag her into this." "Oh, she's already in it," Vanessa replied. "Unless there's something you haven't told her." The accusation wasn't subtle. "What are you implying?" I asked. Vanessa looked at Richard. Richard nodded once. Elena's fingers tightened around her clutch. "There are other matters," Richard said. The way he said it made my stomach drop. "What other matters?" Daniel demanded. Richard turned his attention to me. "Claire," he said, almost kindly. "Before you met Daniel, your nonprofit received a grant from one of our subsidiary foundations." My mind scrambled. "Yes," I said slowly, "a community development grant." "Do you know who signed off on it?" "No," I said. "It went through a board." Vanessa stepped forward. "Thomas Hale sits on that board." The name hit differently now. My pulse began to pound in my ears. "I've never met him," I said. "Perhaps not formally," Vanessa replied. "But his investments directly supported your organization long before you and Daniel crossed paths." The room tilted. "Are you suggesting?" Daniel began. "We're suggesting," Richard said, "that coincidence deserves examination." The accusation was clear now. That I had somehow orchestrated this. That I had known. "That's insane," I said, my voice rising. "I didn't even know your last name when I met him." Vanessa shrugged. "Convenient." Daniel stepped back beside me. "Enough," he said, and there was steel in his tone I hadn't heard before. "You think she targeted me, that she knew about Thomas." "We think," Richard replied carefully, That patterns matter. Loyalty versus suspicion. Truth versus narrative. In that moment, I understood something devastating. They weren't just protecting wealth. They were protecting a story, a version of themselves where betrayal had never occurred. If Daniel was Richard's biological son, then the illusion of their perfect dynasty cracked. And if I was connected, however distantly, to Thomas Hale, then we weren't just a romantic rebellion. We were a threat. "This is absurd," Daniel said. Claire had no idea. "How can you be sure?" Vanessa asked quietly. Silence. The most dangerous sound in the world. Daniel looked at me, not with distrust, but with confusion. That hurt more than any accusation. "Did you?" he asked gently. The question wasn't cruel. It was wounded. "No," I said immediately. "I swear to you." His shoulders sagged slightly, relief flickering. But doubt had already entered the room. Richard straightened. "We're not here to argue speculation. We're here to inform you of the consequences." "What consequences?" Daniel asked. "Your marriage," Richard said, "complicates negotiations." "Negotiations for what?" "The restructuring of assets," Elinor answered. There it was again. Money. Inheritance. Control. "You mean you're cutting me out?" Daniel said flatly. "We're reconsidering," Richard replied. "For loving someone you don't approve of. For destabilizing the family." Daniel laughed again, but it broke halfway through. I was never part of it, apparently. The truth had split him in two. Blood ties versus chosen loyalty. A father who raised him versus a biological stranger who funded my nonprofit. The air felt poisoned. "You can annul this," Vanessa said smoothly. "Quietly, before it becomes public, we can contain the narrative." Contain. Like scandal was a disease. Daniel's head snapped toward her. "Annul," he repeated. "Yes," she said. "It would simplify matters." "You want me to erase my marriage," he said slowly, "because it's inconvenient." "I want you to think strategically," she replied. "And if I do?" Richard's voice lowered. "Then you forfeit protection." Protection. I finally understood. The secret wasn't just about biology. It was about fraud. If Daniel was Richard's son, then decades of financial structuring, trusts, tax advantages, estate plans, had been built on a lie. If Thomas Hale was his biological father, then there were legal implications. And if Thomas had ties to my nonprofit, then this wasn't just personal. It was dangerous. "You've known this for years," Daniel said to his mother. Elinor's eyes filled, but she didn't look away. "I was afraid," she whispered, "afraid of losing everything." "Everything?" he asked. "Or everyone?" She didn't answer. The truth versus the illusion. I turned to Daniel. "We can walk away," I said quietly, "from all of it." Vanessa scoffed. "You have no idea what you're walking away from." "No," I said, meeting her gaze, "but I know what I'm not." "And what's that?" she asked. "Property." Silence again. Richard studied me, as though recalculating. "You think this is about greed," he said. "Isn't it?" I replied. "It's about survival," he said sharply. "If this becomes public, investigations will follow. Questions about estate transfers, about board decisions, about past allocations." My breath caught. "What allocations?" Daniel asked. Richard hesitated. And in that hesitation, everything shifted. The secret was bigger than paternity. The wealth wasn't clean. Thomas Hale's board seat, the grants, the restructuring. It wasn't just inheritance at stake. It was exposure. "Tell us," Daniel demanded. Richard looked at Elinor. Elinor looked at the floor. Vanessa answered. "Some of the early acquisitions weren't transparent," she said carefully. "Certain properties were secured through shell entities. Certain community funds were redirected." My heart stopped. "Redirected? I repeated. To ensure growth, she clarified. Growth built on what? My nonprofit had fought housing displacement for years. Were we unknowingly funded by the very system causing it? The moral ground beneath me began to crack. Thomas handled much of that, Vanessa continued. And if it's proven Daniel is his son. Then what? Daniel pressed. Then liability shifts, Richard finished. There it was. This wasn't about love. It was about blame. About who would carry the weight if investigations began. You're afraid, Daniel said slowly, that if the truth comes out, I become the link. Richard didn't deny it. And if I annul my marriage? Daniel asked. It demonstrates unity, Vanessa replied. It limits scrutiny. So my wife becomes collateral damage. She becomes irrelevant, Vanessa corrected. That was the moment something inside me solidified. Fear transformed into clarity. We're not annulling anything, I said. Daniel looked at me. You don't have to sacrifice, he began. I'm not sacrificing, I interrupted. I'm choosing. Greed versus integrity. Comfort versus truth. The room held its breath. If investigations happen, I continued, then they happen. If funds were misused, that matters. If my nonprofit unknowingly benefited, I'll face that. Richard's eyes narrowed. You're naive, he said. Maybe, I replied, but I'm not complicit. Daniel stepped beside me fully now. They want silence, he said quietly, in exchange for security. And what do you want? I asked him. He looked at his father, then at the documents in his hand, then at me. I want to know who I am, he said, without their conditions. The emotional center shifted. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about identity. If he was Richard's son, then who had shaped him? A lie, a performance. Thomas Hale, he said. I'm meeting him. Richard stiffened. That would be unwise. Why? Daniel asked. Because he might tell the truth. Because he might implicate you, Vanessa snapped. In what? Daniel shot back. Silence again. Danger versus denial. If there's wrongdoing, I said carefully, then hiding it only makes it worse. You have no understanding of what's at stake, Richard said. I understand enough, I replied. Daniel took a breath. If you cut me out, he said to his father, do it openly. Don't disguise it as strategy. Richard's expression hardened. Very well, he said. Effective immediately, your access to family accounts is suspended. There it was. Exile. The cost of defiance. Our friends gasped softly. Daniel didn't flinch. Thank you, he said. The response startled everyone. For what? Elinor asked. For making the choice simple, he replied. Weakness had transformed into strength. Not because he wasn't afraid, but because he refused to let fear dictate him. Richard turned toward the door. This conversation isn't over, he said. It is for tonight, Daniel replied. They left without another word. The door closed. Silence flooded the room. Our wedding reception had become a war zone of whispered disbelief. Marcus approached cautiously. Are you okay? He asked. Daniel looked at me. Ask her, he said softly. Because in that moment, he wasn't sure of anything. Not his father. Not his inheritance. Not even the ground beneath his identity. But when he looked at me again, something steadied. We're married, he said. Yes, I replied. No matter what they dig up. Yes. No matter who my father is. Yes. No matter what it costs. I hesitated only long enough to feel the weight of that promise. Then I nodded. Yes. Love versus fear. Truth versus comfort. The choice was made. Later that night, after the last candle burned low and our friends slipped quietly into the darkness, Daniel and I sat alone on the wooden floor. Our wedding clothes were wrinkled now. The room smelled faintly of extinguished wax. "Do you think I'm a fraud?" he asked suddenly. "No," I said immediately. "But what if everything I built was based on their lie?" "Then you rebuild," I said. "With what?" "With what's real." He leaned his head against the wall. "I don't know what's real anymore." I took his hand. I said. He looked at me, eyes searching. "And you trust me?" he asked. "Yes." "Even with all this?" "Yes." Trust versus doubt. That was our final test of the night. Outside, the city hummed, unaware that an empire might be trembling. Inside, two people sat in the aftermath of revelation, poorer perhaps, exposed certainly, but honest. The family legacy might fracture under investigation, wealth might evaporate, reputations might crumble. But something else had been forged in the fire of that confrontation. Not secrecy, not illusion, truth. And as Daniel squeezed my hand in the dim light of what had been our secret celebration, I understood something profound. Our marriage had survived its first explosion, not because it was hidden, but because it had been tested.